how you handle your team meetings. It's giving a voice to early career scientists and having a culture where maybe at a team meeting, this is something that Janet has done for a notion concept we've done, Interstellar Probe, where, in a workshop, you say, okay, anyone within the first 5 or 10 years of their career, you're the only ones allowed to ask questions right now. And that way it forces the more senior scientists to give a chance to the younger crowd and to embolden the early career people to be able to grow into being leaders.
I will say this, even though you said I'm in good shape, I would be 88 when it got there if it launched in 2030 as we proposed. So I won't be in that good a shape then.
Yeah, well, join the club. But I wonder, does this, everything that Kirby just said about the science side, mainly the science side, do you see this on the engineering side as well? I mean, you must have newbie engineers out there, not long out of school, who are pretty thrilled that they might be carrying this torch.
Yeah, we do. The interesting thing on the engineering side that we struggle with a lot of times too is getting people, these long duration missions. It's very hard for them to get a cradle to grave view of the engineering that goes into it. So we like to mix for our engineering staff. We like to put them on these long, big missions, but we also like to put them on smaller, quicker turn missions where they can see the entire lifespan of the engineering. Because I was an engineer on the New Horizons mission before it launched. So I got to see all of the engineering. Plus, I was able to still be around when it got to Pluto, right? But there were a lot of engineers that didn't get to see that. They worked on the engineering part, saw it launch, and then have either moved on or passed on. So it's an interesting thing because some of the engineers tend to want to see cradle to grave, and these kinds of missions are hard to do that. They only get to see certain aspects of it.
Of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We got to get through this decadal release, first of all. And every one of the proposals that I mentioned, the 9 that I was able to find, every one of these deserves its time in the sun, shall we say. But let's say that we come out, it comes out on April 19th, and it does say that up near the top, or maybe the top priority, is a mission that could look like Neptune Odyssey. Then what? What comes next? Will APL pursue this?
APL may very well pursue it. One of the things that we've learned over the years with the decadals too is something that's proposed in the decadal often will morph and become other types of missions. What you may see is a scaled back version of this that gets put in as New Frontiers or a Discovery class mission. There are a lot of options for where this might end up going. You may also see this stretched out and not done as part of this decadal, but maybe started under this decadal and then continued under the next. It's really up for NASA to decide at what level they would want to do a mission like this, and then as well how they might approach it, or even combine it with other opportunities.
Kirby, if you want to be in planetary science, it really helps to be able to play the long game, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm kind of an impatient person by nature, and ironically, I chose a career path that forces patience. That's the only way to do it. I'm dying to see what the other hemisphere of Triton looks like that Voyager never got to image. I'd love to know more. I'd love some other pictures of Neptune than just what Voyager got back in 1989. I really want to explore the planets and see what's out there, and this is the only way to do it.
Folks, I wish you great luck, at least in terms of the influence that this study may have on the decadal. I would wish the same to any of those other teams. But, as I've said many times, we have talked to a lot of people on this show who want to see a mission to the ice giants. And, I'm one of those. So thank you so much for taking us through this study. I hope that there is good news for you folks and the entire team when that decadal comes out in less than 2 weeks as people hear this.
Thank you for having us.
Kirby, I got to ask you one more question, and it's loaded. When did you first become affiliated?
If you enjoy Astronomy FM radio, please let us know with a small donation. We do rely on your support, and it's true. Every little bit counts.
AFM. You are listening to a universe of possibilities. This is Astronomy FM.
Coming up next, an Astronomy.fm original program. It's time for York Universe, a co-production of the Observatory of York University, Toronto, and the Voice of Astronomy. AFM Radio, AFM Radio, AFM Radio, AFM Radio.
Hello and welcome to York Universe, the astronomy and astrophysics program written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. I'll be one of your hosts this evening. This is Elena Hyde, and I'm joined tonight by Julie. Is actually going to be a little bit of the Elena and Julie show, so tune in today. We are broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory, located at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This is, in fact, Science Night in Canada, where the lineup is all Canadian, starting with ourselves, York Universe, and then on to Western World's Quirks and Quarks and Science for the People. Just as a reminder, York Universe broadcasts every Monday night at 9 p.m. local Toronto time, or Tuesday morning, 2 a.m. UT, just in case you're curious. The York Universe production works in concert with our online public viewing program. That's right, online public viewing of astronomical objects. This is run by our observatory team, who's actually over right now on YouTube, showing cool images on live, and you can chat with them. So go to observatory.info.yorku.ca and follow links to OPV, online public viewing, or you can actually search for our YouTube channel on YouTube. That is York University Observatory, or Allan Carswell Observatory. Should pop right up. This broadcast is powered by and in partnership with Astronomy.fm, the voice of astronomy. If you have any questions or comments about our shows or suggestions for new ones, send us an email at observe@yorku.ca. And just as a note, you can always connect with us on Twitter or Instagram at the handle at York Observatory or at York Universe, and at Facebook at Allan Carswell OBS. All of our programs are free, but if you'd like to make a donation, see our website at observatory.info.yorku.ca. That is also, of course, how you get to the OPV to join our crew. We'll be monitoring the chat room over there for questions and posting content. All right, so that is all the intro, and we have all kinds of interesting history to catch up on. We have, as I mentioned before, this is a little bit of a Elena and Julie show. So, Julie, are you there?
I am. Hello, hello.
It is, in fact, a bit cloudy in Toronto tonight. So our crew is showing some lovely archival image at the moment. Now, if it was a little bit clearer, we would be able to show all kinds of live images. The weather has been just awful this last, week or so.
I've been stuck in the house, so...
Yes, the stuck inside. Anyways, well, I'm feeling a little bit better, I hope.
I am feeling better. Still stuck in the house because I'm still testing positive, but hopefully that will change soon, and I'll be able to go outside again.
I suppose in the meantime, there's always the indoor astronomy options, which include a lot of interneting and, looking up interesting things from space and astronomy history.
Yes, I've done lots of that.
Excellent. Well, we have a little bit of a theme tonight, folks. There's been so much interesting stuff going on in space at the moment. I just can't even, know where to start halfway, because there's just, even if we just start with launches, we have so much to cover. But before we get there, I think, Julie, you're up first for an interesting launch. Now, this is a little bit of last week, because, of course, we did have a week delay, but last week, this week in history, if you will.
Yes, we've had a lot to choose from since we weren't on last week, and we are on this week, but we won't be on next week because of the Easter holiday. So this is a last week, this week in history, April 6th. 1965, with the launch of Intelsat 1, which was also known as Early Bird. This was the first commercial communication satellite to be put in geosynchronous orbit, and that is an orbit where the satellite is always above the same spot on Earth. It was built by Space and Communications Group of Hughes Aircraft Company, which later became Hughes Space and Communications Company, and is now Boeing Satellite Systems. and it was made for ComSat. It was activated on June 28th of 1965, and it was positioned over the Atlantic Ocean at 28 degrees west longitude. It helped provide the first live TV coverage of a spacecraft splashdown, that of Gemini 6, in December of 1965. It was slated to operate for 18 months, but ended up being active for 4 years and 4 months, and was deactivated in January of 1969. It was briefly reactivated a couple of times, once in June of 1969 to serve during the Apollo 11 flight when the Atlantic Intelsat satellite failed, and then again in 1990 to commemorate its 25th launch anniversary. It was the first to provide direct and nearly instantaneous contact between Europe and North America. It handled television, telephone, and facsimile transmissions. And it was one of the satellites that was used in what was then a record-breaking broadcast of a program called Our World, which was the first live international satellite television production. And it broadcast on the 25th of June of 67. There were performance and artists from 19 nations, including the Beatles, opera singer Maria Callas, and Pablo Picasso, appearing in segments. It was 2.5 hours long, and had the largest television audience ever up to that date. And this is a pretty wide swath for an estimate, but anyways, an estimate of between 400 and 700 million people around the globe watched the broadcast.
That is a lot of people.
That is a lot of people.
And this was 1967 that the broadcast actually happened, right?
Yes.
That's really interesting because this actually is going to get us a pretty cool link to our story later on. But these kinds of, early space broadcasts, they really did fire the imagination of everyone. And I mean, this was a communications satellite. But this is around the time where you had Stanley Kubrick's classic, 1968. That was his film 2001 Space Odyssey. And in that film, there's an office marked Hilton Space Station 5. And this is a little bit of side trivia because in, I think it was 1967 or around that time, the Hilton hotels actually did put up a proposal to build a space station hotel and a lunar Hilton design. Of course, this was well before it would be practical to do so. But the idea and the sort of inspiration might well have been this very geosynchronous communication satellite. It was around the same year, after all. And of course, now, just last week, as I think we'll talk about later, space hotels are beginning to become a slightly more relevant topic.
I can almost imagine what that proposed hotel would have looked like.
Yeah, it apparently their ideas of what you could do on the moon were a little bit unrealistic. But I think the general space station hotel idea, it was, I believe there's 1958. Which is I think that's several years earlier, was sort of the first mission of, or first mention of, could there be a lunar or a space Hilton hotel? And then it was 1967 where they actually did submit a plan. I know they had a moon plan for Hilton on the moon. I don't know if they had a full plan drawn up for the space station version. But, there's a great quote, something, imagine yourself in the Galaxy Lounge of the Lunar Hilton, the first hotel on the moon. And of course, you have to have a transparent ceiling, which would be somewhat of a problem if you had a giant transparent dome on the moon. That I don't know that we could have that quite that technology, given the size of the current windows on the space station at the moment. But it's quite a nice idea. Of course, since this was the early 1960s, it's not really a lounge unless you can order a martini. So there's quite a bit of discussion about how martinis can be made in zero gravity or lunar gravity. And I don't know if anyone has any better science on low gravity martinis since then, but it does seem like if we start getting hotels, we're going to have to start thinking about this as well.
Well, they're just sketches, but maybe I will. I found an article.
Excellent. Well, I mean, you were mentioning, of course,
in the chat.
You had all these artists, and you had said something about the Beatles and artists being inspired and appearing on that the Our World broadcast. That's maybe one of these artists was also inspired to draw up a space station hotel, artistic rendition, shall I say? It is, as they say, interesting times. So, yes, I will encourage everyone to go and look up those pictures if you can find them.
I put them in the chat in the on YouTube. So
excellent. So if you're
people
on OPV,
go join there. Yes.
If you're on OPV, you can find it there.
Wonderful. Or you could just Google Hilton on the moon.
Yes.
Hilton Hotel on the moon, and you will find something pretty quickly.
That old artwork really is quite nice, I have to say.
And yeah, I mean, what's interesting is like they've got some like floor plans, and there are things that you wouldn't necessarily have in a hotel on Earth, like a hospital.
Oh yeah. I mean, anything you build either as a space station or on the moon needs to be largely self-sustaining because it's quite a journey to get anything up there. And even with modern rocket technology, it takes a while to get space on a rocket. So you wouldn't want to try to have to do anything in a big hurry. All right. So shall I move us backwards in time just a little bit? Similar idea. So just a little bit before. So that early bird Intelsat, that was 1965. I'm actually just going to go a little bit earlier to 1961. So that's 4 years earlier on April 12th, which I know is jumping around a little bit because that's now this week in history and not last week, this week in history. But of course, it's almost time to celebrate the first human in space. So that was, of course, Yuri Gagarin, who made one orbit around the Earth on April 12th, 1961, on a flight that lasted 108 minutes. And so that flight was really, I mean, you say the flight heard round the world, but it was hugely influential, and it really brought about a lot of celebration of space. And recently, much more recently, there has been an endeavor to kind of bring back some of the excitement around this early flight by Yuri's Night. So that's actually a International Day of Human Spaceflight. So that's on same day, April 12th, 1961. And that is the day that Yuri Gagarin left and became the first human in space. So I believe this was also started in Canada, is what I was reading last year. And it was, of course, Yuri's Night is a slightly more recent type of celebration. So I'm not sure what's happening in Toronto. But if there is a event near you, or you're thinking of live streaming something, let us know. And in Canada, generally every year on around April 12th, there is a party planned. So just so you know, that is tomorrow. I haven't seen anything posted for Toronto. Have you, Julie?
I have not. I actually just went over to urisnight.net to check out the events listings, and it looks like there's nothing listed in Canada for tomorrow.
Oh, that's a little too bad.
You'll have to fly to New York.
Well, I mean, the Museum of Flight is, isn't that in New York? I think they're definitely having one.
They are definitely having one, yes.
And of course, this particular flight is a great celebration of that, first human to actually survive the vacuum of space. And this was a really interesting period of time because, of course, this was 1961. You had in the U.S. at the time, you had President Kennedy. And there was, of course, all kinds of political intrigue happening. And this was a wonderful kind of, I don't know, something that kind of brought people a little bit back together. And it was launched by one of the old Vostok rockets, and they had one complete orbit, and it actually had, even at the time, 1961, automatic controls to come safely back to Earth. And this was one of the things that, of course, caused a bit of a panic because they were the first, and that, of course, led to a bit of a space race between the U.S. and the Soviet at the time, trying to find out who could then be the first for, I don't know, the next big adventure of traveling on the moon. And it's quite an interesting time of year, and it's an interesting time of history as well, talking about how people are getting so inspired and we're sort of coming back around to that right now with people getting more and more inspired about the ideas of going into space, or even potentially going to a space hotel in orbit, maybe going to the moon. And this led to the U.S. promising to get an American on the moon by 1970. So it was a very, very interesting times.
Definitely. I feel like we're embarking on interesting space times once again.
Yeah, well, it's all these things are becoming much more feasible. We've seen launch after launch going well, and I'm always really worried what's going to be the first launch that doesn't work. But so far, they've all been so reliable and so by the book. It's quite impressive. So I did find that apparently this year there will be an online celebration for Yuri's Night 2022 with Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Cool.
So just as an FYI, if you are thinking of potentially staying home, there are still some Yuri's Nights events that you will be able to get to on the internet, which is always fun. And of course, looking at people's posting astrophotography, if it is clear, we'll try to post some from the observatory as well.
I mean, just so you know, I am now dancing in my chair with the Bill Nye the Science Guy theme music going through my head.
I don't know if we're allowed to reproduce it due to copyright issues.
That's quite all right. It's perfectly fine.
But yes, head. if you have ever heard the theme song, it is probably running through your head as well. But yes, this is the just as an FYI, if you haven't heard of it, the Yuri's Night is largely viewed as kind of a night of sort of bringing people together with space and looking for global events. We can try to find one if you are maybe outside of Canada, and it's usually music, art, science, culture, and all that good stuff. So happy almost Yuri's Night, everyone.
It's Yuri's Night Eve.
It is Yuri's Night Eve. That's actually a really good point. And, since we're in the 1960s with our This Week's in History, it just felt right to mention this particular flight of a human into space, this first human into space. And now, just this last year, how many humans have we seen go into space? So many. It was 4 just that last launch. And we've increased our frequency of sending humans into space, and we've actually decreased the price a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Starting, as you say, interesting times.
I mean, it's still not something I could afford to do, but
no. We will be waiting for the York Universe gift tickets to arrive, but barring that, we'll be watching it on YouTube, I think. So speaking of space and traveling around between dates and times and years and weeks, I think we've got also a another space mission with 1997, I think, Julie?
Yes, more launches.
More launches.
April 4th, 1997, and this was the launch of STS-83. So this was a space shuttle mission flown by the Space Shuttle Columbia. It was a science research mission that achieved orbit successfully, but due to a technical problem with a fuel cell, that 15-day duration was shortened to a little under 4 days. The mission was reflown later that year with a launch on July 1st as STS-94 with the same crew. So much science was planned for this mission. The primary payload was the Microgravity Science Laboratory, or MSL, which was a collection of microgravity experiments housed inside a European Space Lab long module. The MSL, that acronym really does not come off the tongue easily, does it?
No, it does not.
MSL featured 19 material science investigations in 4 major facilities. So there was an anomaly in an electrical power generating fuel cell number 2 of 3, making it appear that oxygen and hydrogen might be starting to uncontrollably mix, which is bad, and that could lead to detonation, which is a similar scenario that caused the explosion on Apollo 13. And that was being monitored pre-launch and into the early part of the mission. They did some troubleshooting, the anomaly persisted and appeared to worsen, and so they have, NASA has contingencies for its contingencies. And so they had a certain voltage threshold, and that voltage threshold was crossed. And then so there were flight rules that required that the fuel cell be shut down past that threshold. And then with only 2 fuel cells working, there was another flight rule that was invoked, and that required that the mission be ended early and that the space shuttle come back. Chris Hadfield was serving as Capcom for that mission, and he has said the following about the flight rules. Quote, the beauty of flight rules is that they create certainty when we have to make tough calls. In real time, the temptation to take a chance is always higher. However, the flight rules were unequivocal. The shuttle had to return to Earth, end quote. So when Columbia returned to Earth, the mission managers decided to refly the same mission, as I mentioned, giving it the next available number, which was STS-95. And so the crew got to go back up later that year and complete their mission.
Wow. Talk about exciting times.
Right? Apparently there were like alarm bells going off all the time during their 4 days they were in space. I mean, I wouldn't think a trip to space would be calm.
No, but yeah, when you said only 2 fuel cells working, that's I mean, at some point with that many different things happening, you'd be like, can I go home now? Right? That's yeah, I am glad that they came back. That does sound very scary.
Ice water in their veins, astronauts, I think.
Yes, I believe you have to have some very good self-calming techniques in this particular case.
I don't know if you've read Chris Hadfield's first book.
I have not yet. I've been trying to work my way to it, but I keep getting distracted by other things.
It's fantastic. One of the key messages that I got from it was that they do so much training.
Oh, yeah.
That you're basically prepared for anything. It kind of helps with the nerves.
Yeah, well, that is one thing to consider as well with these missions. As you say, this was 1997, and the other missions we talked about. The amount of training these astronauts had to do is incredible, and even astronauts on standby, end up training for years and years and years and years, and they wouldn't even maybe get a chance to go up. And so they really are, exceptionally well trained, exceptionally bright people who were going up as astronauts. And so it was one of the reasons why it was, I would say ordinary people like myself were somewhat daunted by the idea of I am not that healthy and smart and and so it was just thought to be kind of out of reach of sort of the ordinary average person. But what we're seeing now is that with increased automation on a lot of these flights, the requirements for training of astronauts has gone down quite a bit as well. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but it is opening up, as long as you have a spacecraft that is largely automated, it does seem to be safer for a larger range of people to go up into space.
I would still want to have someone there who's trained on going to manual.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agree. All right. So, speaking of well-trained people, I suppose I'm not quite sure how to segue the next one.
Sorry.
So I think we've got time for one more. So I'm actually going to talk about something that I don't think we talk about nearly enough, just in general in science, in Canada, which is the Indian Space Research Organization. And actually back in the 70s, so I'm hopping around a little bit, this is 19th of April, 1975, the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, built India's first satellite, Aryabhata. It was actually launched by the Soviet Union, but this was a really cool satellite, and I don't think that the ISRO get nearly as much credit as they ought to for all the cool stuff they've done. So this satellite was launched, as I say, in 1975. It was launched by a Russian rocket, a Cosmos 3M, if you know the Russian rockets. It went up and it had went up to about 619 kilometers, and it was built to conduct experiments in X-ray astronomy. It also did, I believe, a little bit of aeronomics and solar physics, and the design of the spacecraft was really cool. It was not, as were a lot of early Russian satellites, a sphere. It was not a cube. It was not a rectangle. They built. Anyone to guess, Julie? Or do you know?
I don't know.
It's awesome.
Was it? I don't know. A hexagon.
You're close. It was a 26-sided polyhedron, 1.4 meters in diameter. All faces of this awesome thing were covered with solar cells. And despite this utterly awesome design, it did have a power failure about 4 days and 60 orbits after launch. It did have 60 successful orbits, but after it lost power, the spacecraft could not be operated. The mainframe actually stayed active. So this was 1975. It stayed active until March 1981. And it was tracked until February of 1992 when it actually re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. So it actually stayed in space despite power failures and all of these things. It stayed in space from 1975 all the way to 1992. And this was, as I say, their very first satellite. So I can't think of anyone else who's had their very, very first launch stay in space that long, despite losing power and everything. And it's actually a really great mission in many, many ways. I just have to mention it was named after the 5th century astronomer and mathematician Aryabhata from India. And if you haven't read about this particular fellow, it was, I absolutely 1000% recommend it. He made all kinds of really, really great discoveries. He created number notations. He did astronomy. He did a lot of mathematics. His pure mathematics discussions of square roots and cube roots are apparently things of beauty. But he also did a lot of spherical astronomy. He did plane trigonometry for lunar and solar eclipses, and basically noted about the luminosity of the moon. He noted Earth's rotation about its axis, and this was, I just like to remind you, quite a long time ago. This was 476 to 550 CE. So if you're familiar with your dates there, this was very, very very, very early on. So that was common era, but quite a long time ago. So lots of wonderful stuff there, and I just love that they've named their first satellite after Aryabhata, and it actually was such a cool mission in so many ways.
I think you're right. The ISRO does not get the props it deserves.
Yeah. And I think I want to see more polyhedron designs for these crafts because it is awesome. 26-sided polyhedron. Now that is a space hotel I would stay at.
It does look pretty cool.
All right, folks, you have been listening to, or you are listening to, Julie and Elena over on York Universe. We are still here. We're broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory, located at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Just as a reminder, we have been posting extra things, and our crew is over on OPV. If you want to find them and chat about astronomy or what we're talking about, or any of the images they're posting, you'll find them at observatory.info.yorku.ca, and you'll also find them on Twitter at York Observatory or at York Universe for this very show. And we're currently discussing all things in space, space stations, space launches, all kinds of stuff. And if you're interested in joining in, hop over to OPV and join in the conversation. In the meantime, we do have one or two little reminders, actually, just to get everybody interested and, I suppose, up to date. We are still doing our York University Observatory teletubes every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. And that is right now every Wednesday that we're not doing in-person tours. So just as a reminder to folks who might be a little bit unused to the fluctuating circumstances, we have been doing online only shows for most of the pandemic, but we're now doing in-person tours approximately 1 to 2 Wednesdays every month. And if you want to find out when the next tickets are available, you can find that on our website. The other big announcement is also on the website, so I'm waiting to give you the full link here. The observatory, the Allan Carswell Observatory at York University, has a new Astronomer in Residence program. And it's not just with the observatory, it's actually the Astronomer in Residence program with Killarney Park. If you're not familiar with Killarney Park in Ontario, it is between a 4 and a 6 hour drive, depending on traffic and how fast you go. I've never made it there in 4 hours, outside of Toronto. And it is a certified dark sky site area. This certified dark sky area is, of course, a provincial park, and it has lots of hiking trails, camping grounds, and all this great stuff. It also has an observatory, which we are working with throughout this entire summer. So if you know any astronomers who like dark sky sites, telescopes, and possibly camping, make sure to let them know that the Astronomer in Residence program is running all summer 2022. And if you have any questions, that's also on the website. So now I'll give you the full link. That's observatory.info.yorku.ca. So our new Astronomer in Residence program, I'm really, really thrilled about this. The Killarney Park staff are absolutely wonderful. And the telescopes out there are a 10 and 16 inch, which are semi-automated, but the dark skies are amazing. So the views you get are actually fairly comparable, just, different resolution from our 1 meter telescope. So I'm hoping we can do some cross live streaming with them this summer once our first astronomer in residence gets there. Who will it be? Well, we're not sure yet. I haven't gotten all the applications in.
It could be you.
It could be you. It could be you, Julie.
Well, not the first week of May, but I hope to be later in the summer. Pick me, please, please.
Well, if you'd like to apply.
Oh, I will be.
The application is live online. Just as a note to people who are applying, it closes every Sunday for applications to be processed. And generally speaking, we try to fill more recent weeks first. So if the week you want to apply for isn't available on the application, you'll have to wait until the earlier weeks get filled. So right now you can apply for May. And then, of course, June, July, August, and September will all become available. All right, so that is actually all the reminders, plus a little extra chit chat. But yes, hopefully we are able to share some exciting images with you this summer, which, if possible, we might even try to overlap with an OPV in the York universe. So who knows? Maybe we'll do a triple whammy. That's that's what you say in cards, right? So
I have no idea, but sure, we'll make it a thing.
We'll make it a thing.
Sure, it's our show. We'll make it a thing.
Yeah, no, I think this is what you would say for Pinochle, the old card game. It's anyways. Enough Pinochle and cribbage aside. Let's go ahead and look at some news for this week, because we've been teasing you all with all of these space news from history and launches and satellites. However, this news item I am very excited for, Julie, because I happen to have watched this launch with my class. So why don't you take it away and tell us all about it?
Sure. I don't know if people out there are aware. There was a little launch last week.
It was so exciting.
So this was the Axiom 1 or AX-1 mission, the first commercial crew to visit the International Space Station, which launched on Friday, April 8th, in SpaceX Crew Dragon Endeavour from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, carrying 4 astronauts, 3 of whom were first-time flyers. They arrived on Saturday at the ISS and were promptly pinned as the world's newest astronauts. The Axiom 1 commander, Michael Lopez Alegria, who was the first former NASA astronaut to return to the ISS, marked the arrival with the pinning ceremony honoring his crewmates, Larry Connor of Ohio, Mark Pathy of Canada, and Eaton Stibbe? I am probably mispronouncing that, of Israel, who is also Israel's second citizen to fly into space. The pins were commissioned by the Association of Space Explorers, which have members from 38 different countries that have flown astronauts. And the crew will take part in a multidiscipline science program sponsored by the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory in collaboration with the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, the Canadian Space Agency, Montreal Children's Hospital, the Ramon Foundation, and the Israel Space Agency. And they'll also conduct activities for Axiom Space, which is the Houston-based space services company that organized their flight as the first step into its plan to develop a commercial space station.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting stuff because the way that they're doing it is a little different. It's a little bit what we've seen before. Of course, SpaceX did send, of course, it was Inspire not too long ago. Inspire. I forget the names of all these different things. I think it was Inspiration 4 actually. Now that I remember it. So space tourism for SpaceX is not necessarily new, but this is the first time we've seen this number of tourists go up on SpaceX to the space station. And I will say I did actually look up the price per person, and the three paying businessmen, entrepreneurs, that's the Mark Pathé, Larry Connor, and Etienne Stib. They also paid about $55 million per person, is what I read, and they're saying this is a good deal. Apparently, not for me, but for them, I suppose it was a good deal. And it was SpaceX Dragon's 5th human flight to the ISS because they've actually gone up other times with astronauts.
Yes.
So it's becoming easier, more regular to get up into space. And as you say, there are so many aspects to this. We could probably talk about it for ages because they are actually keeping these folks fairly booked out, as you mentioned, between their outreach. Montreal Children's Hospital is involved, and lots of other outreach things, plus the actual experiments. Now, I think I recall reading as well that Etienne Stibbe, the Israeli second astronaut, he's brought up a thunderstorm experiment began by the first, Allan Ramon, who was on Columbia in 2003, so did not get to finish that experiment. But it's quite kind of special that experiment actually has gone back up with their second astronaut. So it's there's just so many things going on with this. It takes a while to unpack it, really. I heard it described as a really interesting, scientific mission with 3 rich businessmen and their astronaut escort. So I was like, well, I suppose these can both be true.
Yeah, it was kind of, I was looking at this and I was kind of like, my inner cynic was just kind of like, look, it's 3 rich middle-aged white guys.
Yeah, well, they all did pay the $55 million that it took to get up there, and they are all part of this new space tourism boom, really.
I mean, I suppose, but they could have paid the 50 million or whatever for, I don't know, somebody else who isn't a middle-aged white guy to go.
They could have, in theory. I think they all wanted to go, but and again, it's you could always say, well, if you're working with the Montreal Children's Hospital, couldn't you just give them the $55 million? But
that too.
But it is part of a dual-edged sword because as you get more and more of these happening, the prices do start to drop and it does become more regular, and you start to have to wonder about other aspects about it, like of course, what are the environmental risks of increasing the number of rocket launches to a large amount, and don't mean just rocket fuel, but also disruption to the surrounding environment by, of course, the launch itself, creating noise and shock waves and not being very nice to be next to.
I was also wondering, I mean, clearly it's got to be someone with lots of money, sure, but there are more than 3 people in the world who have money to do this. So, how are these people selected? I wasn't able to find anything. But what I did find was how the Axiom 2 crew will be selected.
Oh.
Want to guess?
Is it by their money? I don't know.
No, it's
Okay.
even worse.
Okay.
reality television.
Oh no. See,
Oh,
okay, so
yes.
there's one other huge giant warning factor that we do have to tell everyone about, because this mission is this is SpaceX, but it's not SpaceX by themselves. They have been paid by the Axiom company, and the Axiom company is planning to build their own space station in orbit. And what they're going to do is in 2024, if they don't run out of money or something happens, they're going to dock their own module to the ISS. Then they're going to dock another module, and another one, and another one, and another one, until they have a full space station in orbit. And then they're going to detach from the ISS, and they'll have made a full space station hotel if they're successful. So that's actually their plan, is to build the world's first private space station by adding their own rooms to the ISS. And if they have enough money, they will be able to do it. And if it is a fully private space station, what kind of restrictions are they going to put on their astronauts? What kind of training will they require? And if it leads to a lot of untrained people in space, in a space station together, I'm not sure I feel like this is necessarily a recipe for success. So, you can kind of see that there are some concerning factors about it. But on the other hand, the flight went so perfectly, and it's so inspiring to see things work. But you do have to wonder, because not only, as you mentioned, their selection criteria isn't due to scientific evaluation or capability of the astronauts, and they do also apparently sell NFTs as part of their business plan. So
of course they do.
It might be doomed from the start, but it's like, any discussion we have of possible carbon offsets for the rockets or whatever are going to be completely undone by NFTs. So there's no way to make it environmentally friendly at that point in any case.
Well, maybe they'll partner up with that company that's slingshotting things into space.
I hadn't heard about the slingshot working. I know that there are several different rockets that currently work. But was there an actual prototype?
Yeah, I mean, like, slingshot's not the right word. It's more like the like spin it till it's going fast enough, and then pew. And they had a 3/4. They had a scale prototype.
Oh, I remember
late last year.
that one. It's literally called spin launch, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. It's
late last year, sometime in, I want to say November, they managed to launch a thing. It was like at a fraction of the scale, maybe like a quarter of the scale, something like that. So their next step is build it full size.
5,000 miles per hour space slingshot spin launch. But it is still problematic.
I mean, it's not for people, so I guess they won't partner up with them. It's more for microsatellites, but
it's an interesting idea, I have to say. I mean, it does require a pretty huge accelerator, but they do have it out in that launch facility in New Mexico. So, in theory, it's quite possible. It's just it's a remarkably complex, simple solution, is how I would describe that particular endeavor.
Yes.
But it is interesting that, in terms of launches, the actual emissions generally are not as bad as they used to be. In particular, I believe SpaceX is using a clean-ish fuel, and the Blue Origin is using a completely clean fuel. So there are some good signs in terms of the ways that rockets have been developed, and of course the reusable reusable first stage coming back on drone ship from its most recent launch. I forget what the drone ship was called. It had some silly name. But that was a huge, huge benefit for, just making these things more feasible. And you get into all kinds of questions with these kinds of things about now that we can, should we? And what kinds of, space law are we going to have to incorporate, as well as, potentially space economics to keep track of this new industry. It's, as we were saying before, interesting times.
Mm-hmm. Cue the space lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, somebody has to keep them in line. Give me space Perry Mason. That's what I want.
Ooh.
Okay, Perry Mason in space. The idea started here. Call me, people. In any case, it is worth thinking about when you see these, because it's so fun to watch the launch, and the launch went so well. I mean, it's just pitch by pitch, every single piece of the launch. If you're watching live, you could watch and see it go through the maximum dynamic pressure. You could watch it see main engine cut off, get the stage separation, second engine startup, and it's all so precise. And to have it working so perfectly is such a thing of beauty. But as astronomers, I think it's also important that we try to take into account the rest of the ecosystem around these launches.
Absolutely.
All right. So that was almost all of our. This was a really exciting news item. It's almost all of our time, but I think we have time for a few more. So, Julia, I know you've got a really cool one. I was just going to talk about that really distant galaxy, but do you want to do yours? Because it's kind of cool.
All right. So astronomers come up with a new message to let aliens know that we are here. So back in November of 1974, the Arecibo message was broadcast, and that was designed by Frank Drake and Carl Sagan, and it was intended to demonstrate humanity's level of technological achievement. And it remains like the most well-known attempt to message extraterrestrial intelligence. So, I mean, we've heard of SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Messaging is METI. So there have been several other messages over the years. The Pioneer plaques people have heard of, the Voyager Golden Records, and maybe these ones have been less heard of, the Evpatroia transmission messages, or the ETMs. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a second. So now there's an international team made up of researchers led by Jonathan H. Jiang of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory that have come up with a new signal called the Beacon in the Galaxy, or the BITG message. And it combines aspects of all these previous messages. And the team includes researchers from the SETI Institute, Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, University of Cambridge, the Hansa University of Applied Sciences, Chevron Energy Technology Company, the School of Physics and Technology at Wuhan University, Beijing Normal University, and the University of California at Los Angeles. So like big names around the world. So just as a brief reminder, the Arecibo message contained a counting scheme from 1 to 10, chemical formula for the bases that make up DNA, an image of a double helix, a stick figure of human and human population figure at the time, a depiction of the solar system, location of Earth, and a schematic of the Arecibo telescope. The first METI attempt was actually the Morse message sent in 1962 from Evpatroia planetary radar in Ukraine, and it was sent to Venus, and it consisted of the words Mir, which is peace or world in Russian, Lenin, and USSR. And between 1999 and 2016, several more messages were sent to stars that were between 17 and 69 light years away, including these ETMs that were sent in 1999 and 2003, and that were overseen by Canadians Dr. Ivan Dutil and Stéphane Dumas. And there's even a competition with $1 million prize called the Breakthrough Message out there to like design a message.
So only 1 million though, so it wouldn't be enough for
a trip to space. No, but I mean, sure. So the BITG has 13 parts, and it'll be sent from the 500-meter aperture spherical radio telescope, or FAST, in China, and the SETI Institute's Allan telescope array in Northern California. The target is a concentric ring that is between 2 kiloparsecs and 6 kiloparsecs from the galactic center, because based on the work that Zhang and others have previously done, that is the place that's most likely to have had intelligent life emerge in the galaxy. So the message was designed and coded by a couple of co-authors on the paper, Matthew Chong and Hanjie Li, and Qiqian Jing. And the main parts contain a new combination of graphical information in the form of images, special alphabets to represent numbers, elements, DNA, land, ocean, humans, etc., similar to the 1999-2003 Cosmic Call that were designed by Dumas and Dutil. It relies on the same mathematical language as Arecibo, so it starts and ends with prime numbers to set itself apart from the EM waves, and can be apparently easily picked out by extraterrestrial intelligence. It has a new mechanism designed to help extraterrestrial intelligence decode the message. The row length indicator, which is a repetition of designated numbers of zeros and ones. The original Arecibo message was a rectangular block with the same number of rows and elements per row, but this message can be made of different size rows and then decoded using this RLI. It contains a location stamp and a time stamp. And so the location stamp describes the solar system's position in the galaxy using globular clusters as landmarks, and the timestamp uses hydrogen spin flip to estimate the time we create and send the message in respect to the theoretical birth of the universe. Of course, some people think that broadcasting such a thing is very risky and invites alien takeover, and other people think that we've been broadcasting at low intensity for decades. So, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. I suppose those of us who've read the three-body problem recently might be a little scared, but it is interesting though that these messages, the way they're designed, they're always so dense in information. I really wonder, like, how many humans would actually be able to decode this message if we got it, right? Like, if we got something like this that wasn't, I mean, I'm maybe eventually.
I look at them and I'm like, there's no way I'd be able to figure this out. And I speak the language this was written in.
Yeah, and it would be like, okay, so this is, I mean, it looks artificial, but other than that, it's a little hard to say. But it is really, really cool. So I'm really glad we got to at least come up with this and think about what kind of messages would you send if you could send. that might be actually a really good time to wrap up here. So have a thought about that. What message would you all send if you could? You are, in fact, listening to York Universe. And thank you, everybody who's joined us tonight. This is the Elena and Julie team. So I'll go ahead and say stay tuned, because it is Astronomy Night in Canada. Coming up next is Quirks and Corks, Western World, and Science for the People. You can always connect with us on Twitter at the handle @York Universe, and check out our website for show note contents, updates, OPV, Astronomer in Residence, and everything else at observatory.info.yorku.ca. Thanks for tuning in to York Universe. Clear skies and have a good night.
We hope that you've enjoyed this program from AFM Radio, the broadcast service of Astronomy.fm. This program has been released under Creative Commons license. Please contact us for details. You may find more of our AFM original programs on our website. It's really easy to find us. We are Astronomy.fm. You may also find us in the iTunes radio listings near the top of the News Talk section, and also as an iTunes podcast selection. We'd love to hear your comments. Please email us at radio@astronomy.fm. Thanks so much for being part of the voice of astronomy around the world and across the known universe. This is Astronomy.fm Radio.